This Monday, June 29th, we have a glorious Capricorn full moon that I am so excited about because it brings with it the archetypal energy of two of the goddess asteroids that we talk about most frequently, Pallas Athene and Vesta. They are conjunct Saturn, the ruler of the moon, at the time of this lunation, and they have the power and the potential to bring the most healing and healed archetypal signifiers of those great goddesses into our embodied consciousness and awareness, because Capricorn is a feminine yin earth sign. Capricorn gets a lot of rap for being hardworking and studious and structured and needing a lot of structure or maybe even control. And that definitely can be true. But we must remember that the sea goat represents feminine earth embodied qualities. And as you know, at a full moon, things come to culmination, fruition, or we get a real sense of insight, clarity, and hopefully healing. A full moon in Capricorn is very much like a pregnancy coming to fruition, with hopefully a healthy baby on the other side of that journey, 6 months after a new moon in Capricorn. And in this case, we are very much talking about sexuality, erotic freedom. As I mentioned in my thumbnail, you're not allowed to use the word sexual on a thumbnail. Oop, I might have even said it too soon in this video. So in today's video, I really want to help you understand some of the truer, deeper meanings of the archetypal significance of these two goddess asteroids, their relationship to the full moon, and how to really notice what's brewing within us in the feminine archetype, or regardless of our sexual or gender identity, but especially for women, because these archetypes have been misunderstood, but they also carry with them so many of the patriarchal, colonized, internalized misogyny and self-hatred. The hating of women can be represented by these archetypes really in the coming weeks and months as it unfolds, so that you can really understand what has come up to be healed and to be reflected on in the light of this full moon. Hi, I'm Amy Rose White. I'm an integrative psychotherapist and astrologer. I make videos with concrete healing tools aligned with the archetypal symbols of the current astrological transits. Please be sure and see my Chiron in Taurus healing kit on my website and all my free resources linked below. So why am I talking about erotic freedom, sexual power, and about the balance of those things, and about calling power back in an embodied, juicy, full way when I'm talking about Capricorn, which doesn't always get that signifier being Saturn ruled. Saturn ruled signs we tend to think of, more structured, maybe even cold, distant, melancholic. Those are all accurate designators for Saturn because it was the most distant planet that the ancients could see with the naked eye, and yet it has this beautiful mysticism associated with it. It really is the threshold in the liminal space between the known and the unknown. And Saturn therefore carries a lot of magical significance, a lot of transcendental energy. And because the ruler Saturn of this full moon at Capricorn, did I say it was 8 degrees and 14 minutes? Because that ruler is conjunct, it's at 14, and Pallas and Vesta are conjunct at 17 at the time of this full moon. What we see is a merging of really powerful feminine energy. So Pallas Athene is known for war, strategy, wisdom, healing. She's also an artist. She's a spiritual healer. She signifies intelligence, social activism, valor, of course, and tremendous kundalini or sexual energy, the energy of the earth, the red, hot, core, molten center of the earth that comes up through us, that gives us our core vitality, that is running a circuit through the central channel of the great central sun and the core of the earth, as I see it. And that awakening of Kundalini life force, is part of the reason she's so powerful. It's part of the main reason why she can see in the dark, why she has tremendous healing powers, why she is a prophetic oracle, why people came to her to seek counsel. She is the archetype in the chart of great, tremendous healing capacity for others, ourselves, and enormous Shakti or, creative life force. And one of the negative distortions of the Pallas archetype, our understanding of the primary goddess asteroids, the teachings of Demtra George, who is a goddess in her own right. I had the privilege of meeting her at NORWAC recently, and I was just beside myself because she is a brilliant amalgam of all the goddess asteroids. And so this book, Goddess Asteroids by Demetri George and Douglas Bloch, is a must read if you're curious about this. I'll link this in my description below. My training and understanding, as I've gone deeper into the knowledge of the goddess archetypes, their stories, their mythology, and the multivalent ways we can understand them. They're just presented as very unidimensional, and they could not be further from that. And that could not be further from the truth. But one of the negative, distorted qualities of Pallas, especially strong Pallas Athena in our birth chart, is the disidentification with feminine energy and the over-identification with masculine. And when I say masculine and feminine, I'm talking about the energy of perceiving outward and perceiving the other, which is often what prophetic vision is. It's like seeing into someone else or into the other side. It might be receiving, certainly. There is absolutely a feminine receptive quality to Pallas Athena, but what was she most perhaps revered for and remembered as and thought of is really about war, the Mars-associated energetic archetype of fierceness and courage. And so a wounded Pallas Athena in our charts, and at a time of illumination like this, where we have the ruler of the Capricorn Full Moon conjunct Pallas and Vesta, and we'll talk about that influence, especially with the Eros part in a second, is that we can have so disidentified with femininity as weakness and vulnerability because we are socialized to believe that vulnerability, that crying, that esoteric knowledge, that things that are more intuitive are less important, less valued, not needed, or even less spiritual. Having been a student of the contemplative cultures of the East my entire life, I grew up deifying, figures such as the Buddha, the journey of Arjuna in the Bhagavad Gita. These are men who essentially leave their wives and children and then are, deified as these spiritual beings. Meanwhile, the women are living the spiritual lives in the midst of the material world with the crying baby, with the older grandma. And that isn't to bash, male spirituality, but our archetypal orientation has been to glorify, the pursuit of the individual quest for God, and not the lived, very dirty, nitty-gritty, bloody experience of female intelligence and female wisdom, which Pallas Athena is absolutely about. And this can lead to an alienation with our own sexual bodies, a capacity for erotic pleasure. And some of that can come in these lifetimes and in past lifetimes, in my opinion, through real wounding with the father. Our fathers had an inappropriate sexual attraction or relationship to us. Perhaps there was abuse and trauma. Perhaps it was not that, but it wasn't a father who protected, cherished, and adored you. Or perhaps it was a father who you felt loved by, but he couldn't quite show up, maybe emotionally. And this isn't to demonize fathers out there. It's simply to name that so many of us have a wounded, suppressed inner feminine because it just wasn't safe. And when we learned that being in that space within us was dangerous. So here's the healing that's happening because of the conjunction with Saturn, which brings into the material world the result of our hard work and effort in our healing journeys, in facing our shadow material, in learning to receive at the time of a full moon, which is accumulation process, because it is conjunct Vesta. So the Vestal virgins were not virgins. They did not remain chaste. What they did was they did not commit themselves to any man. They didn't get married. They actually went out and did engage in sexual relationships at their disposal, under their discretion, how they wanted to, and then they would go and engage in acts of purification with springs and ritual and rest and kind of like bring their power back up, wherever it had been shared and with whom it had been shared. And then that devotion was brought back to the temple, to the hearth, to the flame that they tended literally in Athens. And so there was actually a tremendous amount of erotic empowerment, and the ownership of one's sexuality by the Vestal virgins, and the key that Vesta symbolizes, that the goddess Vesta symbolizes. And so there is a tremendous healing that can occur for us at this time. You may get dreams and visions. You may get messages from the other side, Pallas and Saturn. You may have a really healing, incredibly liberating sexual experience with yourself or with someone else who is a really trusted partner, because Saturn represents, and Vesta, commitment and solidness and staying power and absolute devotion, and the people who consistently show up for us. And a lot of us, when it comes to sexual healing, especially if we are survivors of early sexual assault or abuse, really of any kind, that we choose people who are not interested in a product, an outcome, or satisfying their own egos, but in truly being in loving adoration and witness for all of us, emotionally, physically, spiritually, psychologically. And that is what makes for safe sexual relating. And it can do a lot for us to be in that kind of partnership when it comes to reconnecting, not only to our masculine side, which tends to keep a distance. So we might be actually very sexual or even hypersexual, like on paper, but the vulnerability and the deep sense of pleasure in our body might actually be really hard to access. This full moon promises to really highlight where we still need some support about that, and hopefully to reveal where healing has happened, where we actually can rest, soften, and open to ourselves in privacy. And I'm not just talking about sexually, but also just emotionally with our intimate partners. So it is a real healing balm that is available for us, that is asking to be witnessed and acknowledged. And the other aspect to keep in mind is we are just now within 1 degree of this minor grand trine with Pluto, Uranus, and Neptune. Now, those are all in either sextile or trine aspects. And while those aren't always positive, they generally signify a deep esoteric process that lasts, it's permanent. Because when Pluto is involved, even by trine, particularly conjunction and square, what happens with Pluto, it does stay with Pluto in the sense that it's permanent now, kind of like eclipses. That's been my experience with clients and my own life. So there is a real deep, permanent psychological transformation that the spiritual Neptune, the awakening Uranus, and the death, transformation, and rebirth, to get a little colloquial, I know, with Pluto, is happening at this time, right at the time of this full moon. So my invitation to you is to really take some time to notice, where in my own life have I been committed to myself or perhaps to others, and that has disconnected me from my own sexual healing and awakening? Where have I over-identified with the masculine energy? Where have I taken on my father's voice? I know for me, I grew up seeing my mom really struggle. And my dad, although definitely had his own issues that were easier for me to see in adulthood, he was my safe person. And I didn't get a ton of time with him. And when I did, I just really cherished it, because we did fun things and there was a different quality to it. But I was also in a role that was not really appropriate with him. So I learned to be a little bit more of a boy, a little bit more of a partner than a child, and to really over-identify with workaholism, overworking, the masculine archetype of providing, producing, and success. And while that has served me, I do have Capricorn MC, and I'm Aries rising. I'm born to be self-employed, and I have founded and led a couple organizations that have been absolutely soul work for me. So it's been about finding a balance of not burning my body out. I do have Sun in the 6th house, so I have to be really careful with that. And following my desire to serve, but not at the cost of my health and the denial or disassociation from the feminine Shakti Kundalini within me that is very, very awake and very strong in my own chart. So the meditation for this full moon: have I been repressing or disconnected from the fullness of my feminine sexual power? The mirror work for this full moon is, it's your time to bloom. and I've got your back. And your mantra for this full moon is, I've created the safety to soften and allow completely. Thanks so much for being here. I hope this is useful for me. Please give me feedback. Tell me in the comments. I read every single one. Check out my Chiron and Taurus healing kit on my website and all my free resources linked below. If you like this video, you're sure to like these. Check these out above, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.